For lab exercise 9, we're going to talk about compression. Compression is a pretty widely misunderstood idea, starting all the way back to what is it? Because people talk about data compression, right? An MP3 is a compressed file, and a WAV file would be considered full resolution. That is not the kind of compression we're talking about. We're not talking about data compression. We're talking about audio compression. So right there, let's make that distinction really clearly. To try to explain audio compression in the simplest possible way, just consider a file that gets to be as loud as -3 dB away from digital zero, and the softest that it ever gets is -13. So there's a 10 dB range. It gets as loud as -3 and as quiet as -13. So with a compressor, this is just a basic explanation, I can come in and actually reduce that dynamic range so that it no longer has a 10 dB range, but maybe I take the top 3 dB off. So instead of it peaking at -3, I have a threshold that lowers the top down, and it starts peaking at -6 now. So now I've reduced that whole range from a 10 dB range to a 7 dB range. Now, why would I want to do that? Well, now that I've reduced the range, it's pretty common to turn the overall volume back up so that it is now peaking where it was before at -3 dB. The difference is the bottom part, the softest part, is now 3 dB louder than it was before, and so we hear it better. So in a lot of ways, compression can either protect you from getting digital distortion, so it can stop your levels from going too high. It can also reduce the dynamic range so that you can hear the quieter parts better. So let's take a look at that right now. Again, I've got Zenon's project pulled up, and we're going to solo the vocal and leave everything on this time. And I will go to a different part, so we're going to be tired of hearing Zenon pretty soon. Here we go. I'm going to open up what I have on Zenon right now. And the compressor that I'm using is this FG116 by Slate Digital. Now let's take a look at what's happening.
Freely flying with my friend, we'd fly as far as we could, we'd go higher until the end.
Okay, so if you were watching up here in this little window, you saw that the needle was going all the way back to almost 10 dB of GR. That's gain reduction. So when he was singing, his loudest peaks were being reduced by 10 dB. That means that we can crank it up and hear the quieter passages of his vocal line 10 dB louder than we could otherwise. Now that's really important in pop and rock music because you've got usually a lot of stuff happening. You've got drums and bass and guitars, and all that stuff is going on while the singer is supposed to stay on top of it. And the singer sometimes wants to, not be screaming all the time, but we still have to hear them. So a compressor can kind of be thought of as a automatic volume rider. Imagine somebody sitting there riding the volume for you in order to keep the vocal on top. Now, this is not the type of compressor that you're going to have at your disposal in Logic, so I'm going to show you what those look like. I'm going to close this guy, and I'll leave him on for right now. If I come here again to any of these slots between the input and the stereo on a channel in Logic, I happen to be on the vocal channel. I could have gone to a amplifier or the bass, but then I'm going to come down to dynamics, and the compressor is in the dynamics area. Here it is. I'm going to open that up. And so you have, again, the same needle that we had in the Slate Digital compressor. Let's watch what this does.
Freely flying.
Nothing yet. Haven't turned the threshold down low enough.
Freely flying with my friend.
So as I lower that threshold, the line comes down and down and down until it finally starts biting into the vocal. And as it bites into the vocal, we see the needle move.
Freely flying with my friend.
In this case,
we'd fly.
I have to come pretty far down because it's really low coming out of everything else. But so what I've done at this point is I've compressed it at a ratio of 1.5 to 1. That's a very, very gentle ratio. I'm going to open something else up so you can kind of visualize this a little bit better.
Freely flying with my friend.
So this threshold, or excuse me, this ratio control, if I set it at 1.5, watch what happens to this line right here. You see it kind of starts to bend down a little bit. Now that's pretty gentle. That means that as the volume of the track goes above the threshold in this case is indicated by that little white dot, then it's being turned down just a little bit.
Freely flying with my friend.
And we can see up here that we're seeing the gain reduction of 3 dB.
Freely flying.
Now, as I increase the ratio from 1.5 to 2, watch again what happens to this line. There it is at 2. There it is at 3. So as the ratio goes higher and higher, we're clamping down more and more on how much room we give the vocal to grow after it passes the threshold.
Freely flying.
So it was up to about 7 dB of gain reduction at that threshold. If I go back to 1.5,
freely flying.
It only peaked at 3.5. So you can change the amount of gain reduction in two ways. The higher the ratio, the more the gain will be reduced, or the lower the threshold. Either one of those is going to bite into it, and you have to use your ears to decide. So that's what's happening. Although we don't see that in the Logic compressor, that's the same idea. That's what's going on over here when I switch from a 1.5 ratio to a 2 or to a 3 or to a 4 or a 5. There's your ratio control in Logic. Threshold and ratio. And then we have the makeup gain. So once you take a little bit off the top, you can bring the bottom back up by however many dB maybe you wanted to roll off the top. One other thing to play with, almost every compressor has these controls, attack and release. And this determines how quickly into the transient the compressor will grab the signal. So if you've got a guitar that's got a lot of scrapey pick noise, and you like that scrapey pick noise, then you want to leave a few milliseconds for that scrapey pick noise to get through before the compressor kicks in. Maybe, 10 milliseconds or something like that. However, if you're trying to compress and reduce that scrapey attack on the guitar strings from the pick, you might want to clamp down quicker. And so in this case, the compressor is grabbing it instantly, and it's going to stop those transients, the articulation, the attack of the note will get clamped down. Then release is also the same way that it handles letting go. So a lot of the times, you might have a compressor that's trying to do a job, but you just don't like the way that it sounds. And if you come here and experiment with your attack and release settings, you can get what you want that way sometimes. So there we go. That's the compressor, threshold, ratio, makeup gain, attack, release. I'm not going to talk about everything here. You can play with that and experiment. There's also a bunch of different types of compressors. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different styles of compressor. They're all doing the same thing in terms of the controls, but they have different characteristics. And so you might like the Opto vintage compressor here for softer vocals, something that's going to just treat things a little bit more gently and have a warmer sound. You might want the FET for something different. Maybe you like the FET sound for your bass guitar. you can play with these guys. They will have different characteristics, just like different types of EQ sound different. The compressor will sound different as well from one style to another. So we see we've got VCA, FET, and Opto, as well as a couple of different types of things. Again, you're going to want to practice with this. You're going to want to see what it does. So I would highly recommend that you try this on vocals, especially if it's your voice and you know how your voice sounds. It'll be challenging to get a natural sound and also clamp down on it. And so that's what you're going to want to do. You're going to want to spit either something with vocals out or something with guitar out. We'll need an A and a B option so that we can see that you've done the work for exercise 9 for this week. And good luck.